Hi there and welcome back. Over the months we've been looking at different parts of the ecosystem that sits around mirrorless cameras as well as mirrorless cameras. So we've touched on perhaps the microphones that can be used for video recording. We've looked at memory cards, memory card readers, chargers, batteries, and I thought this week we'd perhaps take a look at another key piece of many photographers' kit bag, which is how they go about supporting their cameras to make sure that they get tack sharp images and avoid any kind of movement or blur in certain situations. I'm sure, like me, many of you have got quite a selection of different pieces of kit for supporting your cameras. I've built mine up, like many of you I'm sure, whilst using DSLRs, which by their very nature are heavier and larger quite often than the mirrorless cameras we use now. And therefore this gives us an opportunity perhaps to look at the tripods, monopods, mini-pods that we're using and see if there's any opportunities there. So as I say, I've got quite a selection of pieces of kit that I use to support my camera, from full-size tripods right down to the smallest of mini tripods. So I've got a few of them out. I was looking through them the other day. And I thought I'd just pick on a few of them and look at how I use them and what are the opportunities that mirrorless may give around them. So let's start at the larger end with the largest tripod that I have. It's not the biggest tripod you can buy in the world. It's more of a travel tripod because a lot of the photography I do involves carrying my camera gear either when I'm traveling or just around London or other cities. This is a three-legged Thing Brian version 1.1 tripod, and I've had it for about 5 or 6 years. They've evolved their model range quite significantly, so this is no longer available. It's a 5-section tripod. It folds up quite compact. It's a carbon fibre leg tripod, so it is relatively light. I think it's about 1,600 grams including the ball head and about 1,100 grams just the legs on their own. It's quite versatile. As you see, it folds up this way and then you fold the legs down as you do on so many of the travel tripods. One of the legs is a monopod. You just unscrew it, take it off and put the ball head on it and you've got a monopod. This tripod will hold more than I can ever put on it with my cameras, even with my DSLR. It's a really robust tripod. It does go up to just under 2 meters when you extend it right up, although it's a little bit wobbly when you get up there because of the 5 sections, mean the bottom leg section is quite narrow. And you can take the center stem out and put it in upside down and go right down to the ground with this tripod. So it's actually a really good tripod. I've used it in many occasions. I used it on a beach quite recently, so it got quite a lot of sand in the joints, and one of the great things about three-legged Thing is that you can totally take it apart yourself and clean it and put it back together again really simply. So it allows you to maintain the tripod. It has had a little bit of attrition. The little ball level here dropped out. There's a bit of wear on it, and the ball head isn't quite holding as well as it did start. So I'm going to have a look at that to see if I can just tighten it back up again so it can cope with my 7200 on my Z7 or my Z6. It's a great tripod. It's, for me, a real trade-off between weight, size and stability. When you're talking about stability, it's really important to think about how you're going to use this. What lens camera combination are you going to be using? As I said, the 7200 does cause the ball head a little bit of a challenge, and the ball head does just drop and sag very slightly because of the off-center weight of that combination. Equally, the other thing you've got to think about when you're thinking about stability is not necessarily just the weight and the size, but it's the diameter of the legs and the number of sections. Because the more sections, the more joints you put in, the more movement you're likely to get in the tripod. So when you're picking a tripod, really have a think about your use case. In my opinion, a tripod is something that really is worth thinking about. It's worth investing in to make sure you get the right tripod for what you're going to use it for. There are some cheap tripods out there on the market, and when you put a camera on the top of them, they move around, and that really defeats the object of carrying them around. Sometimes you're better off really carrying something that's a little bit heavier and then getting that tack sharp image. As I said, for me, the three-legged thing Brian that I've got is that trade-off between size, weight and stability, and it's really served me well. So whilst it was quite expensive when I bought it, I've had it for 5-6 years. I'm sure it will last another 5 or 6 years, and over that time, when you amortize the cost of a tripod and it came with the ball head, it's really not as expensive as it looks on day one. The next piece of kit we're going to look at is something that I've used for many years, and I said in my three-legged thing Brian, it's got a monopod that you can unscrew and take off one of the legs and use it as a monopod, but that only comes up to about 1.2 meters, which is a little bit low for me in a lot of situations. So I bought in a sale another three-legged thing, carbon fiber monopod. It's a 4-section monopod, and it came without a ball head, and I quite often use it with a Manfrotto fluid head for video, or a ball head when I'm doing perhaps some sport. And I've actually, what I did was, I quite like the idea of Benro, I think it was at the time, had these feet on the bottom of their monopod, and you can lock them in place so they're quite stable and the monopod will stand up, although I wouldn't trust it with too much weight on top of it. Or you can release the screw thread, and then what you can do is you can put it on the ground and you can move the monopod and the camera on top with a fluid head to really get some smooth tilt shots. And then when you don't want the legs anymore, you just push the button and fold them up. So this, weighs in at about 0.6 of a kilo, so 600 grams, pretty light, and therefore it really is versatile. And you can put it in your camera bag. It fits in the camera bag. It's about 45 centimeters long, and it will just give you a little bit of stability. It won't stand up on its own like a tripod. So if you're perhaps doing some wildlife photography or some sport photography where you're using a longer lens on your camera, therefore it's quite heavy, it's quite off-centered, the monopod can be a real great help in just taking some of that weight out of the camera so you can hold it stable, and it's not a great weight penalty to carry around. But as I say, sometimes carrying around a 1-2 kilo or more tripod all day and then not using it can be a bit of a chore, and this is where perhaps the size and the weight of modern mirrorless cameras really comes in and can help us. Another piece of kit that I carry around quite regularly is a Joby GorillaPod. This is the 5K kit. I bought the 5K kit, which can hold up to 5 kilos, when I had my D850 and 7200 and 2470 f2.8 lenses, and I felt I needed that extra support for that kind of kit. The 5K has aluminium ball joints. It weighs in at about just over 700 grams with the ball head, about 500 grams, just under 500 grams without the ball head. It fits into your backpack, and it's great for doing time lapses or videos where perhaps you've got somewhere you can stand the tripod on top of, perhaps a wall or a tree stump, and it means you don't have to necessarily carry a large tripod with you. It's not as steady and stable as a full tripod, so if it's going to be windy or breezy, or you're going to put a fair bit of weight on top, I wouldn't necessarily go with this, although you can bend the legs right out so you get quite a lot of stability from it. But for me, it's the versatility of being able to carry something to support my camera whilst not carrying a full tripod, or when I want to be discreet, perhaps in a street photography situation, but where I think I may want to do a time lapse at some point, for example. So great piece of kit. We're seeing some innovation coming from people like Joby. They brought out recently the 3K Pro, which is an upgraded 3K model of the same GorillaPod. It holds up to 3 kilos, but I think they've upgraded the ball joints to metal ball joints, so it's a bit more robust. Now I won't be trading in my 5K kit, because whilst it's a little bit heavier, I got this for about £60 here in the UK, and the new 3K Pro is still retailing at about £150. So whilst we're seeing innovation, we're also seeing some, interesting increases in price that go with that. Now, the weight of the Nikon Z series cameras and lenses has got to a point that perhaps if you're using one of the f4 lenses on your Nikon Z series camera, you can even get away with something even smaller. And this is a three-legged thing, Iggy, and I will point out I'm not sponsored by Three-Legged Thing, honest. These kind of mini tripods and three-legged thing don't make this anymore. It wasn't the most robust of products, if I'm honest, and therefore I'm in the market for a replacement for this. This was meant to hold up to about a kilo and a half, and it came with a mobile phone adapter on the top as well. But it's a little tripod that weighs no more than a couple of 100 grams, and you can either use it as a grip for your camera or as a little tripod, and it's great for just throwing in your bag when perhaps you're just taking a single camera, a single lens, and you want to have a single small tripod just in case you see something and you want to video it, produce a time lapse or something similar. So I've been looking at the Manfrotto Pixie Evo 2, which is meant to take up to, I think, about 1.5–2 kilos. And that may well be joining my kit bag in the near future, and I'll give it a test if I do get it. We are getting to the edge of the trade-off between size, stability and weight in terms of the tripods at this level, and that's why I'm quite interested to see whether the Evo 2 can stand up to what I'm looking to use it for. Perhaps when I'm wanting to do a video when I'm on the road and I just want to do a quick impromptu video or a time lapse, and I haven't got a full-size tripod or my GorillaPod with me. And these little tripods, I've got a couple of small GorillaPods. I've got the three-legged thing Iggy, and they're great not just for cameras but also for when you're doing a lighting setup, or perhaps you want to put a mic a bit closer to someone you're interviewing. So they're really versatile. They don't weigh anything. They fit into your kit bag really easily because of their size, but they do come into their own in many different scenarios, and they're not massively expensive at sort of £30 here in the UK. So moving away from tripods and monopods, I've got a couple of other pieces of kit that I use on a fairly regular basis, but for slightly different reasons. First of these is what's called a pod. I think it comes from a Canadian company, and it's basically a nylon bag with some plastic pellets inside that allow it to stand and mold around things on their base, and it's got a screw thread on the top that you can screw into the tripod mount on your camera. I bought this for a smaller camera, and it doesn't naturally stand up with the weight of a Z series camera. It does tilt forward. However, what you can do is you can push it forward, and then it does support the camera and lens. This is the 1430 f4 lens. I wouldn't necessarily use it with the f2.8 lenses because they're too front heavy. But it could be great for when you're traveling and you just want a piece of kit to perhaps support your camera. What you can do is underneath here you've got Velcro, so what I tend to do is I tend to empty out the little plastic pellets into a little box, leave them at home, just carry the nylon pack, and then when I get somewhere I buy a bag of rice and refill it with rice. A very cheap way of refilling it. And then of course you can either, if you're camping, you can use the rice while you're trekking, or you can perhaps throw the rice away when you're coming home again to reduce your weight if you want. So not ideal for even the mirrorless cameras because they are slightly heavier and slightly front heavy, but it really does come into its own in some situations. The other option is something I bought when I went on safari many years ago, and that's just a very simple beanbag. These are probably £10–15 here in the UK on eBay. Just a material bag with a zip at one end, and again you can empty out the pellets that are inside very easily, carry it flat and then refill it when you get to where you're going. And this is great because I bought this to go over the window or the side of a door on a safari jeep, and then you just put your camera and lens rested on the top, and you can still move it around. So it works really well in a lot of situations, very cheap, very simple, very lightweight. So there we have it. You know, we've looked at a whole range of different pieces of kit to support your camera there, from ones that cost about £10 here in the UK up to hundreds of pounds for a tripod. And it's like camera bags. You're never going to find one piece of kit that will do everything and cover every trade-off you're going to want as a photographer. So I think, like me, many of you will have a collection of different pieces of kit to support your cameras. I think where the mirrorless cameras are starting to come into their own, as I've said, is that with their lighter weight and their slightly smaller size and footprint, we are going to see some innovation in this space perhaps. And also it allows us to challenge ourselves of, do we need a full-size tripod for what we're going to be doing in a particular shoot? Can we survive with a smaller tripod? One of those mini tripods in some situations. I'm not saying they'll totally replace a full-size tripod for me, or many of you I'm sure, but just having that portfolio of different pieces of kit that you can pick up the right one for the right opportunity really can be beneficial when we're going out on a variety of different shoots. And it's another example of how mirrorless cameras really do come into their own when you look at the ecosystem we put around them of the kind of kit we can use for different situations. I'd be really interested to hear from you what you're using in terms of pieces of kit to support your cameras. Are you still using your legacy tripods from when you perhaps had a DSLR? Or have you invested in perhaps a smaller and more lightweight setup for what you're doing? Let us know in the comments below, it'd be great to hear. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and as always, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video.